Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the New York Jets at the Dallas Cowboys in their Week 15 matchup played December 19th, 2015. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for this Saturday night football game. Of course, it was Thursday night on Saturday night. It's really just Saturday night football, but in December we get a couple Saturday games being that college is into the bowl season. But here we had some pro football between the Jets, who are in the mix in the wild card hunt, coming into this game tied with two other teams at 8-5, with the Steelers and Chiefs needing a win to try to keep pace and keep ahead and put some pressure on the Steelers and Kansas City. And Dallas entered the game still in the mix in the NFC East, but a loss would bring that to a close. Of course, a win would keep them alive. They needed to win out, and they needed the other three teams in the East, the Redskins, Eagles, and Giants, to all go 1-2 in the remaining three games. But of course, that was predicated on them winning out. But to start this game, the Cowboys would get the ball first. Matt Cassel under center to start things off. That wouldn't last for too long, but on the first possession, they start off on their own 21. And on the first play, Cassel went to Whitney, picked up 15 yards and a first down at the 36. Then on 2nd and 10 from the 36, Whitehead on an end around picks up 33 yards and a first down at the New York Jets 31. So into Jets territory. Then on 2nd and 5 from the 26, Darren McFadden picked up 11 yards and a first down in the red zone at the 15. Their drive would stall, though, on the 9. And so after a couple of incomplete passes, and Dan Bailey would come out to attempt a 27-yard field goal, it was up, it was good, and it was 3-0 as the Cowboys put the first points on the scoreboard with just under 11 minutes still left in the first quarter. So now the Jets would get the ball for the first time in this game, and the Cowboys would force them to go 3 and out, as the Cowboys played some excellent defense in this game throughout. But in this game right here, the Jets would end up punting from their own 18-yard line, and now the Cowboys would take over on the New York Jets 43. So they're in Jets territory to start this possession. But on 2nd and 17 from the 50, Cassel is intercepted by Darrelle Revis. And on the play, it was kind of an interesting play in terms of Cassel was looking one way, then he kind of looked like he almost tripped and fell, but he kept his balance, but not quite, as he ended up throwing the ball off balance, and it was intercepted by Revis, as there was no one around. There was actually a couple of penalties against the Cowboys on the play, but they were declined, being that it was an interception and the Jets had the ball. So it would actually been, there was an ineligible man downfield, and he also got called for intentional grounding, but both were declined, and Revis with the interception would give the Jets the ball on the Dallas 35. So the Jets had the ball in Dallas territory now to start this possession, and they would get down into the red zone. They got all the way down to the 3-yard line, where they were faced with a 4th and 1, and they gave it to Chris Ivory, who actually has been having a pretty good year, and Ivory got stuffed. So the Cowboys defense coming up again with another huge defensive stop. They'd forced the 3 and out on the Jets' first possession, and here the Cowboys forced the Jets to turn the ball over on downs in the red zone right there on the 3-yard line, as Dallas would now take over on their own 4-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. But they would be forced to punt the ball after 3 plays. So they went 3 and out on this possession and would end up punting from their own 8-yard line with about 2.5 minutes still left in the first. So now New York would take over on their own 40, and they would quickly move the ball to midfield. And on 3rd and 10 from the 50, Fitzpatrick went to Decker. And Decker, it was an interesting play here. He picked up 13 yards, but I would say it's a fumble. But they did not call it a fumble. They actually ruled that he was down. The Cowboys challenged the ruling. It looked like a fumble to me. You can make your own choice on that one. It was about as close as it could be. I guess you kind of just would go either way in terms of maybe where your bias might lie. If you're a New York fan, then you're probably saying, oh no, it was not a fumble. If you're a Dallas fan, you would say it was a fumble. If you're not biased, you would go either way because it was that close of a play that you almost could make either call and you'd be right and wrong either call. So there really was not a right or wrong call necessarily on that play, although I was more leaning towards it being a fumble, but instead it was a first down on the Dallas 37, so the Cowboys get charged with a timeout there. And then on 2nd and 10 from the 37, Fitzpatrick went to Brandon Marshall. He picked up 25 yards and a first down in the red zone at the 12. And up to this point, Marshall had let a couple passes go through his hands, but right here we see Brandon Marshall do what he does, as he's one of the top receivers in this game, picking up 25 yards in that first down at the 12-yard line. And with the first down at the 12, they give it to Bilal Powell, and Powell makes a nice move and gets into the end zone for a 12-yard touchdown run. Randy Bullock goes for the extra point, but he missed. It was wide right, so that's not a sure thing. And with the missed extra point, it would be a 3-point game as the Jets took the lead 6-3 with about a half a minute still left in the first quarter. So now the Cowboys would get the ball after the kickoff. And there was actually a penalty against the Jets on the return. So Dallas would take over on their own 34, and they would bring the first quarter to a close. And on the first play of the second quarter, Cassel was sacked by Pace. And so that would bring up 3rd and 30. And they would end up punting on 4th down after picking up 17 on 3rd down, but 4th and 13 from the 31, they would punt the ball to the Jets, and the Jets would take over on their own 20. But the Cowboys defense comes up big again as they were playing really solid all game long. They forced another 3-and-out by New York as they would punt the ball from their own 29, and now the Cowboys would take over on their own 26. But on 3rd and 7, and at this point, this is actually when they switched over to Kellen Moore under center. They took Cassel out the game as he was not producing anything. He wasn't really having much success other than that first opening drive, which they ended up having to settle for a field goal. But with the score 6-3 and with just over 11 minutes left in this game, Kellen Moore comes in under center. And on 3rd and 7 from the 29, Kellen Moore, on just his second pass of his NFL career, is intercepted by Gilchrist. And so Kellen Moore gets picked off as his first pass actually went for a loss of 1 yard on the play prior, and his second pass is an interception. And so now the Jets would take over on the Dallas 24, already in field goal range, but a holding penalty pushed him back to the 34. But then after a pick up of 14 yards on second down, they're faced with a 3rd and 4, and Fitzpatrick was sacked by Crawford right at the line. And so now Randy Bullock would come in to attempt a 36-yard field goal. He had already missed that extra point, but he puts this one through the uprights, and it's now 9-3. So they extend their lead to 6 with about 7 minutes left before halftime. Now the Cowboys would take over after the kickoff on their own 21. They did get a first down, but their drive would stall on the 38, and so they would end up punting after 4 plays on the possession. So now the Jets would take over with less than 5 minutes left before halftime, and the Cowboys force another 3-and-out. And so that would bring us past the 2-minute warning, and the play after the 2-minute warning was the punt. And so the punt would put the Cowboys at the 45 as they would take over. So they got a decent little return, a 15-yard return by Whitehead to bring it to the 45. And on first down, Kellen Moore goes to Williams. Terrence Williams, 14-yard reception. And with a horse collar tackle against Pace, that would make it a first down on the New York Jets 26. So the Cowboys with a first down in field goal range. And then on 2nd and 10 from the 26, Kellen Moore goes to Butler. He picks up 16 yards. Now it's a first down in the red zone at the 10-yard line. First and goal. And Kellen Moore hits Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant gets it in the end zone. A 10-yard touchdown. Kellen Moore's first career touchdown pass in the NFL. Dan Bailey hits the extra point. And now the Cowboys take the lead back. for the second time in this game as they went up 3-0, but now it was 10-9 with just over a minute left before halftime. So now after the kickoff, the Jets would take over on their own 21, and they would end up with a 2nd and 10. Fitzpatrick went to Bilal Powell. He picked up 19 yards and a first down at the 40, and then Fitzpatrick goes back to Powell. He picked up 11 yards, and now was first down at the Dallas 49. So at midfield, and then a penalty for pass interference, kind of a questionable call, in my opinion anyways. It seemed like the calls were going towards the favor of New York, although that would change in a moment. But of course, that's the thing, is Dallas was kind of hurting themselves with these penalties that hurt them on offense and hurt them on defense. But it was now a first down at the Dallas 30 for New York. And then on a 3rd and 2, an incomplete pass would bring out the field goal unit as Randy Bullock would attempt a 40-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, but then there was a penalty against the Jets. So they get a penalty for an illegal shift, and so that was actually where all the calls seemed to be going the Jets' way, but that call goes against New York, and it ends up costing them 3 points because Bullock now had to line up to re-kick, and it was now on the 27, made it a 45-yard kick, and it was no good. So instead of getting that 3 points there, we end up going to halftime with the Cowboys still in the lead by 1 with the score 10-9. So the Jets had a chance right there to take the lead going into halftime, but they would get the ball for the first possession of the second half. They would start off with it on their own 15, and they would eat up some clock here on this possession, ate up about 5.5 minutes, and they would end up getting into Dallas territory, but their drive would stall on the 42, and so they would end up punting the ball to the Cowboys. So now the Cowboys would take over with less than 9.5 minutes still left in the third. They had the ball on their own 18 after the punt. They got the ball up to midfield and into New York territory. They were faced with a 1st and 10 on the 43, and Darren McFadden picks up 33 yards on a run. A nice run by McFadden to make it a first down in the red zone at the New York 10. So it's 1st and goal. McFadden picks up 4 yards on first down. Now 2nd and goal from the 6. Kellen Moore drops back looking for Dez, but he's intercepted by Calvin Pryor. Pryor coming up with a pick in the end zone, and he actually ended up bringing it out to the 11. Maybe should have just took the knee. They would have had it on the 20, but the Jets would take over after the interception on their own 11-yard line, kind of backed up against their own end zone, but with just over 5 minutes still left in the third quarter. But on 2nd and 11 from the 10, Fitzpatrick is intercepted by Mitchell, and so back-to-back interceptions, and now the Cowboys would take over in field goal range right on the verge of the red zone at the New York 21-yard line, but they were not able to really move the ball, and they would end up having to settle for a 38-yard field goal on 4th and 8 from the 19 as Dan Bailey put it through the uprights. And with that kick, it was now a 4-point lead for the Cowboys with the score Dallas 13, New York 9, with less than 4 minutes left in the third. So now after the kickoff, the Jets would take over on their own 25, and they did get a first down, but their drive would stall to 43, so after 4 plays, they would punt the ball to the Cowboys. So now the Cowboys would take over after the punt on their own 13-yard line, backed up against their own end zone, and they were faced with a 3rd and 1 from the 22, and McFadden picks up 12 yards and a first down at the 34 as the third quarter comes to a close. So that brought the first quarter to a close, and then to open up the fourth quarter, Dallas would end up having their drive stall, and they actually got a penalty when they were about to punt the ball. They would push them back to the 31, and so they ended up punting the ball to the Jets, who now would take over on their own 30 after the punt with 14 minutes still left to play in this game as they trailed by 4 points. And on first down, Fitzpatrick went to Marshall. He picked up 14 yards. And on second down, first down, second play of this possession, first down from the 44, Fitzpatrick goes to Decker. He picks up 13 yards. And now it's a first down in Dallas territory at the 43. Then on 2nd and 10 from the Dallas 43, Fitzpatrick goes to Brandon Marshall. He picks up 20 yards and a first down at the Dallas 23. Then after a penalty pushed them back, they actually had a 2nd and 19. Fitzpatrick went to Ivory for 5, and that set up 3rd and 14 from the 27. And Fitzpatrick goes to Inunwa, and he picks up 24 yards and a first down at the 3-yard line. So a first down in the red zone, 1st and goal. An incomplete pass brings up 2nd and goal from the 3, and Fitzpatrick goes to Eric Decker. Eric Decker had left the game earlier on that call that was challenged as to whether it was a fumble, but he had came back into the game in the second half, and he gets this touchdown, a 3-yard touchdown reception. Randy Bullock adds the extra point, and with that, the Jets take back the lead as they were now up by 3 with the score New York 16, Dallas 13, with just under 9 minutes left to play in this game. So now the Cowboys would take over on their own 17 after the kickoff. They would be faced with a 3rd and 4 from the 23. Kellen Moore then went to Cole Beasley. Beasley comes up clutch here with a 23-yard reception to make it a first down at the Dallas 46. And then a penalty ends up bringing a couple of penalties would actually put Dallas in kind of a precarious position. And then they actually were faced with a 4th and 2 from the New York 46, and Moore went back to Beasley, picked up 9 yards and a first down at the 37, but their drive would end up stalling at the 32, and on the first play after the 2-minute warning, Dan Bailey hit a 50-yard field goal to tie this game up at 16 apiece. So the tied field goal with just under 2 minutes left, and now the Jets would get the ball on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff. They were then faced with a 3rd and 1 from the 29, and then Fitzpatrick with the QB sneak, and he ends up with the first down. So now the first down from the New York 31, and Fitzpatrick hits Thompkins, and Tompkins goes 43 yards and puts them in field goal range with less than a minute left, as it was now first down at the Dallas 26. So now at this point, Dallas had all 3 timeouts, and the Jets would just run the ball. They gave it to Bilal Powell. He picked up a yard. Dallas used their first timeout. Then on 2nd and 9, Powell picks up 4 yards. Dallas uses their second timeout. Now it's 3rd and 5. They give it back to Powell. He actually loses a yard, and the Cowboys use their final timeout. So now on 4th and 6 from the 22, Randy Bullock would come out to attempt a 40-yard field goal. He had missed an extra point earlier. He'd also made a field goal, but here he kicks this one, and it is good. So Randy Bullock with the 40-yard field goal, and actually the Dan Bailey field goal that had tied the game went off the upright. I just went so fast by that one, but he hit that one off the upright. Dan Bailey did, the 50-yarder that tied the game. But Randy Bullock gets this one through a 40-yard field goal to put the Jets up by 3, 19-16, with just over half a minute on the clock. So now the Cowboys would get the ball after the kickoff on their own 24. And on 2nd and 2 from the 32, Kellen Moore looking for somebody. Everybody's covered, and he throws up a prayer. I don't know what he was thinking, as it was all green jerseys around the ball. Dez Bryant tried to do something. He got a hand on it, but it was intercepted by Williams. And now all that was left to do was for Fitzpatrick to line the team up in the victory formation, take a knee, as the Jets somehow survive in Dallas to win this game 19-16. So the Jets coming away with the win on the road against the Cowboys, they had Kellen Moore under center. Of course, a big part of that was the turnovers. The Jets, they intercepted Cassel once. They intercepted Moore 3 times in this game, so 4 turnovers, and that ended up being the difference in this game was the New York Jets defense. As the defense for the Jets came up huge. It was a really defensive battle in this game, as the Cowboys defense was playing very good as well. but they just didn't have enough offense. And the Jets are now 9-5 on the season. They're 4-3 on the road, so they go above 500 on the road at this point, with just 2 games left to play. And of course, with the win to go 9-5, they now have a half-game lead over the Steelers and Chiefs, who are yet to play. They'll play tomorrow, or today rather, if depending on when you're listening to this. But the Jets putting the pressure on them as they're keeping pace in that wild card hunt. And the Cowboys are now officially eliminated. They're 4-10. They're 1-6 at home on the season. So the Cowboys, I mean, give them credit that the fact that they were able to stay alive in the playoff hunt this long with such a bad record. Of course, that has to do with the division, the NFC East, and you can only wonder if what if Romo had been healthy. It would have been a completely different season for Dallas. And also, what if DeMarco Murray had actually re-signed with the Cowboys even with Romo's injury? The Cowboys would probably be leading the East by 3 or 4 games, but instead they were eliminated from the playoffs. And really the best thing for the Cowboys at this point would be just to lose out and to get the best pick possible. I would probably go with defense in the first round and add somebody who can come in and make an impact right away, and then in the second round pick up a running back. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. The Jets, again, really good coaching, and they had a big performance by their secondary. Their defense stepping up in this game. They're also putting on pressure with their pass rush as well. But they were having trouble stopping the run. I almost wonder if the Cowboys, if they would have ran the ball a little bit more. You wonder, why are they throwing the ball so much with such ineffective quarterbacks? Why not run the ball a little more when they were having pretty decent success on the ground? McFadden had a pretty decent game. He had 100 yards on the day. And the Jets, I mean, this one, it is a road game. They got the win. That's all that matters in the end. But the thing about it is if you're going to struggle to beat Dallas, on the road, how are the Jets going to go into Denver or Cincinnati in the wild card round? How are they going to win? They're not. And the thing is, Fitzpatrick is really a paper lion. I mean, it's funny that Fitzpatrick seems to be getting like a pass, that everybody's forgetting about his past, about how he's a turnover machine. Yeah, he's been playing good this season, and he's been playing really good in the last 4 games, which is the 1 interception in this game, and no turnovers in the last 3 games prior, and they're now have won 4 games in a row for the first time in 5 years. And I mean, he's having a good year, no doubt about that. But he is not a proven commodity by any stretch of the imagination. And he's having success, against the lesser teams. He's not proven himself even in the regular season against any real, top defense necessarily. Although the Cowboys have an underrated defense. But, I mean, basically what I'm saying is that everybody gets on Andy Dalton. He even gets booed in Cincinnati in the offseason, just because he hasn't won a playoff game, even though he's had nothing but success in the regular season. But somehow Fitzpatrick is trumpeted as like this great quarterback when really the guy is like the anti-clutch. He did come through in this game, with that touchdown to Decker, and then also, got him into field goal range. Of course, Thompkins made that play. Of course, Fitzpatrick had to get the ball to him. But he's kind of benefiting from a really good coaching staff, and especially Todd Bowles is doing an excellent job with the Jets. And there's so much talent around Fitzpatrick. But when it comes down to it, the Jets fans who are riding high right now, well, you're going to be very disappointed when it comes down the stretch, because Fitzpatrick will be Fitzpatrick. And until he proves otherwise, I don't see where it's just a couple games is any evidence that he's gonna come through when it counts. Well, we'll see though. But in this game, he actually 26 for 39, 299 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception for Fitzpatrick. Chris Ivory had 13 carries for 37 yards. Bilal Powell had 6 carries for 25 yards and a rushing touchdown. He also had 7 receptions for 54 yards, which gave him 79 total yards in this game. Ivory also had a catch for 5 yards, which gave him 43 total yards. Brandon Marshall, 4 catches for 74 yards. Eric Decker, 6 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown. And that's really the thing, Brandon Marshall, his impact cannot be overstated, as he is a huge reason to why the Jets are having so much success. He's such a clutch player. He comes up with big catches when they need him to, and just having him on the field also opens things up for Decker as well. The Cowboys doing a really good job shutting down the run in this game. Before Dallas, Cassel was 3 for 8 for 37 yards and threw an interception before leaving the game. And then Kellen Moore came in to go 15 for 25, 158 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Which, even though he had the 3 interceptions, Moore actually didn't play that bad. He actually looked pretty decent, all things considered, being this is the first time he's ever stepped on the field when it counted in the regular season. His first pass attempts, he also got his first touchdown, and he got his first 3 interceptions. But you can also kind of question and wonder why they hadn't put Kellen Moore in earlier, a few games ago. But Darren McFadden had 16 carries for 100 yards in this game. He also had 2 catches for 13 yards, giving him a total of 113 yards. As he had a pretty good game, but they needed to give him the rock more. They didn't give him enough carries. I don't know how you have Kellen Moore throw 25 passes and McFadden only gets 16 carries. Of course, on the other side, you can say the same thing. Why is Fitzpatrick throwing the ball 39 times and Ivory is only getting 13 carries? Of course, the Cowboys were really stuffing the run. But Dez Bryant had 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. Jason Witten, 5 catches for 49 yards. Cole Beasley, 3 catches for 37 yards. Of course, Cole Beasley, all 3 of those catches came at times when it really counted. But we look at the kickers in this game, and Randy Bullock, 2 for 3 on the field goals, 1 for 2 on the extra points. Of course, if he had made that extra point and that field goal, then it wouldn't even have necessarily been a question at the end. That's kind of partially what made it close. But Dan Bailey, 3 for 3 on the field goals, 1 for 1 on the extra points. And then we look at the defense, and the defense for the Jets. Calvin Pryor had an interception, Gilchrist had an interception, Revis had an interception, and Williams had an interception. So the 4 picks. Calvin Pace had a sack, and Williams and Richardson each had a half a sack. And for the Cowboys, Lawrence had a sack, as did Crawford, and Mitchell had an interception. Then we look at the team stats. 20 first downs for the Jets, 15 first downs for the Cowboys. On third down, the Jets were 5 of 14, 35% conversion rate. They went for it once on fourth, did not convert. And for Dallas, they were 2 for 11, 18% conversion rate on third down, 1 for 1 on fourth down for the Cowboys. The Cowboys, that was a big issue for them in this game, was they could not convert those third downs. Of course, put in those passing situations, and that was obviously their weakness. We look at the total net yards, 372 for New York, 309 for Dallas. And on the ground, the Cowboys netted 133. They averaged 6.3 yards per rushing play. And the Jets on the ground netted just 73 yards, as they only managed 2.8 yards per rushing play. So the Cowboys doing a good job shutting down the run. But then we look at the net passing yards, 299 for New York. Fitzpatrick sacked twice, but did not lose any yards. This both times he was kind of stepping up in the pocket, almost looked like he might run, but got dropped right there at the line. And then for the Cowboys, they netted 176 passing yards, allowing 2 sacks for a loss of 19 yards. Look at the penalties in this game. The Cowboys ended up with just 6 penalties for 54 yards, but those penalties really hurt them. Like, they came at the worst possible moments for the Cowboys. And the Jets actually had 2 more penalties with 8 penalties and 61 penalty yards. And it didn't hurt them as much. Of course, they did, it cost them 3 points before halftime there. But in the end, it didn't really make much of a difference. And we look at the red zone. The Jets 2 for 4, 50% in the red zone. The Cowboys 1 for 4 in the red zone, just 25%. Is that really hurt them? Is they couldn't convert in the red zone, especially with the interception in the red zone. Really came, that really sealed the deal. Even though they still had another shot at the end of the game, but the Jets won the battle of possession, 32 minutes 17 seconds to 27 minutes 43 seconds for Dallas. So the Jets, they get the win. Like I said, that's what matters the most. And the Cowboys gave them a tough time. They've got a good defense, actually. The Cowboys' defense is very underrated, especially when they're healthy. And they're decently healthy, all things considered, on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, not so much on the offensive side of the ball. And that's kind of the thing with the Jets. They struggled to beat the Cowboys in a game that they really, if they were serious contenders, they should have been able to go into Dallas and win pretty handily. Instead, this game was really tight, back and forth, defensive battle, that they were lucky to come away with the win in this game. So that doesn't really bode well for the Jets going down the stretch. Not really looking too strong, although they do have some very impressive components on their team. Their run game, that's the one thing. Usually that's their strength, is that run game, but they got shut down in this game. But Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, coming through. Of course, Marshall didn't have the touchdown, but he made some big catches, made some big plays, setting some things up. Also, Decker with that touchdown. Thompkins came up with that big catch that set up the field goal. And even Enunwa made some big catches as well, coming up pretty clutch in some tight spots. And Fitzpatrick, as much as I've, talked him down, still I give the guy credit for what he's doing, although I just don't have faith in him to actually lead the Jets to a playoff victory. And that's really what matters at the end of the day, at the end of the season, is can you win in the playoffs? They'll get there, but they might not. That's the thing, too, is I don't necessarily trust them to even get them there. But I do trust their defense. Their defense was playing pretty solid. And, it was kind of easy pickings for that secondary, with those 4 picks against, obviously, subpar talent. Although, it's being a little rough on Kellen Moore. He actually did look pretty decent when he wasn't throwing 3 interceptions. But on the other, regardless of that, you take those away, even though that's a lot to take away. But he actually did look halfway decent. And it's his first time stepping on the field in the regular season. And, and he's got to go against a Jets defense that is actually one of the tougher defenses in the league. So, but let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great weekend and enjoying all the sports.